foremost advocate on trade and tariffs, Peter Navarro, an assistant to Donald Trump and the Director of Policy of Office of the Fair Trade Policy at the White House. Peter, good to see you, sir. Thank you for giving us time.
It's been too long, sir. I remember during the campaign, your wonderful studio there. I don't know who you paid, but that studio is the best in New York. Apologies to everybody else, but I love that thing.
And our new one is even better. You have an open invitation to come and visit. Now, on the question of Mexico and the trade tariffs, the decision to use tariffs has been widely criticized as taking tariffs from an economic tool to one for immigration and thereby other purposes.
So what we have unquestionably at the border is a national security and an emergency. What we have is a situation where Congress has refused to act, and prior to last week, Mexico had refused to act. It was totally appropriate to use the International Emergency Economic Powers Act in the way that President Trump did. And as President Trump has correctly said, Mexico refused to do in 20 years what it only took about 2 days to get us to do with the prospect of tariffs. We see it. The tariffs, Richard, have multi-uses. In some cases, they're simply a defense of our national security. For example, in the case of steel and aluminum tariffs. A similar use is in China, where we're trying to defend ourselves against practices like forced technology transfer, intellectual property theft, the use of unfair subsidies in state-owned enterprises. And in the Mexican case, clearly, this was an appropriate regulatory response to a terrible situation, and we got a great outcome out of it.
Okay, but it is what is being described as the weaponization of tariffs. You're taking them and essentially bullying another country on the threat of a tariff.
Those who are using that term are simply those who are opposed to our policy in general. It's the Chamber of Commerce, it's the multinational corporations, it's the anti-tariff crowd who have seen our jobs go offshore and have America used as what President Trump has correctly called the piggy bank for the rest of the world. So that term, hey, look, throw that away. What I see today behind me is a beautiful weather and a lawn at the White House, a very bullish economy. We've got 7 million jobs out there available for Americans and only 5 million people seeking jobs. We've got an epic low unemployment rate. We've got investment pouring into this country. This is bullish, and tariffs are an important part of the president's strategy to bring about the economic renewal and manufacturing renaissance we're seeing in this country.
Some people suggest the president doesn't fully understand how tariffs work. Well, no, let me read you.
He says,
no, come on.
He is the smartest guy in the room. He's the smartest guy to sit in the Oval Office on the economy and business in 100 years. I can't think of anybody who's smarter than he is on this. So I'm not going down that road with you.
Well, he says we have so much money that is pouring into our treasury right now.
$17 billion we've raised to date on the tariffs. And by the way, the people who are paying that money are the countries that tariffs are levied against. China clearly bears the burden of the tariffs. They bear most of the burden in the form of lower prices for their products, fewer exports, lower profits. The Chinese government itself is having to devalue its currency out of desperation. What we have, the Chinese government is facing lower tax revenues. And meanwhile, I would point out in Q1, we had a 3.2% real GDP growth rate, and guess what? A full 1 point of that was due to our reduction in the trade deficit, primarily because of the China tariffs. Tariffs are good.
You accept that the strict operation of the tariff is paid by the importer, which is then passed on to the distributor and ultimately the American consumer.
No, of course not. Come on, you know better than that. This is a task in what's called tax incidence analysis. Let's say, for example, I'm an American consumer. I pay $100 for a product from China before the tariff. If I'm still paying $100 after the tariff, it's because China has lowered their price and bitten that bullet and devalued their currency. In that case, I, as an American consumer, didn't pay a cent more. Look, if
correct, but the evidence, Peter, is that one of two things are happening. U.S. corporations are cutting margins to account for that tariff, or they're passing it on.
Not U.S. corporations, my friend, unless they're setting up in China and selling back here, which we don't want to happen. Bring the jobs home. But if it's a China corporation, we're not shedding any tears for a China corporation that uses all sorts of government subsidies to dump products into this market. Look, here's the thing. China is paying for the China tariffs, not American consumers. There's no inflation in this economy. We're in a virtuous cycle. This is why things are so bullish, and the stock market is reflecting that.
Let's talk about the China, what might happen next. Please, I know time is tight, but please have a listen to what the president said today, and we can discuss it after. Have a listen, sir.
Right now, China wants to make a deal very badly. It's me right now that's holding up the deal. And we're going to either do a great deal with China or we're not doing a deal at all. Right now, China is paying us billions and billions of dollars. They never gave us 10 cents. And China ate our country alive during Obama and Biden.
What are you now waiting for from the Chinese to do the deal? The president said he is now the one that is waiting. Waiting for what?
Well, look, you know the history of this. We go back to Mar-a-Lago at the beginning of this administration. We've given the Chinese many, many opportunities to negotiate in good faith, and we had a 150-page plus agreement across 7 verticals, including the forced technology transfer, the intellectual property theft, and they reneged on that at the end. So that's where we are. I don't want to say any more than that, other than to say that we've got the President of the United States is the best negotiator in the world, with a lieutenant in Robert E. Lighthizer as the USTR, as the finest negotiator I've ever met in the trenches, basically working with the Chinese, and we'll see what happens. And we'll either get a great deal or we'll get tariffs.
Finally, I just want to ask you, the sort of psychological, philosophical, geopolitical, whatever posh word we want to use, of the United States using tariffs in this way, dragging, effectively, humiliating Mexico, dragging them to Washington.
We did not humiliate Mexico. We got their attention. We love the Mexicans. The president of Mexico and our president get along great. They know that there's a crisis. As the president said, look, they had no incentive to do what they did until we gave them the incentive. So, I mean, this tariff policy is working. It's simply a negotiating tool that we use when we need to use it, and it's getting people to the table. Look, one thing I should say, the American people are behind this president. A recent Harvard-Harris poll came out just a few days ago, and it showed that a majority of people in this country support our tariffs on China, and close to 80% of Republicans are behind this president on the China tariffs. They understand, everybody in America understands that China has been eating our lunch and raiding our piggy bank, and one of the best successes, I think, of this president has been to change the narrative and dialogue on China in a mere 2 years. Before this, it was like, let's engage with China. They take our lunch.
Peter, last question.
Sure.
You must be, I suppose, impressed is the word. You came into this White House. Tariffs, by and large, have been a dirty word in economics since Smoot-Hawley. You know, they've been very targeted, but now they are a fundamental part of the United States industrial or trade policy. Do you take much credit for that?
No, not at all. I would say in our history, sir, you go back to the days of McKinley and Jefferson and Lincoln, tariffs were what made this country great. And we have a situation here where around the world, countries are allowed to systematically charge us higher tariffs. My office, the Office of Trade and Manufacturing Policy, just came out with a report which showed that over 2/3 of the time, American exporters face higher tariffs on their products than we charge on the same or similar products. So what we're trying to do, I mean, we're for free trade, but we're for fair, balanced and reciprocal trade. And tariffs are useful for defense. Tariffs are useful to get people to the bargaining table. The president is playing it